As we write this, we are witnessing a national uprising against anti-Blackness, police brutality, and systemic racism. This is happening in the middle of a global pandemic in which Black people are disproportionately dying at higher rates than white Americans. We know this is a scary, uncertain, and triggering time for many of us. It doesn't help that there are conflicting ideas about how to understand this historical moment in social media, within your families and communities, and among your friends. As sociologists, our teachings and writings on race and racism are grounded in historical and contemporary research, and we want to offer a frame to you, our students.
In 1903, sociologist W.E.B. Du Bois observed that the problem of the 20th century is the problem of the color line. In 2020, what Du Bois described as the relation of the darker to the lighter races of men in Asia and Africa, in America, and in the islands of the sea remains a terrible conundrum, particularly in the United States. Though the U.S. was founded on and continues to espouse principles of equality, the historical roots of the present social, economic, and political inequality have laid the foundation for ongoing state-sanctioned and supported violence against Black, Indigenous, Latinx, Asian American, immigrant, and GLBTQ communities. The recent killings of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, and Tony McDade highlight this persistence and its devastating impact.
State-sanctioned violence is not limited to isolated, dramatic instances epitomized by police-involved killings, but also include ongoing daily indignities, obstacles, and challenges for communities of color, especially members of the Black community.
The historical legacies of colonialism, chattel slavery, and white ethno-nationalism continue to create and justify racial logics that contribute to the oppression, suffering, and death of Blacks and other people of color. The same social forces that cause anti-Black violence manifest in sexist, homophobic, classist, religious, ethnocentric, and transphobic violence as well.
Anti-Black racism reflects a longer history of racial capitalism, heteropatriarchy, and the regime of rights, in which state-sanctioned violence normalizes exploitation.
The state claim to legitimate violence is problematic, given the present unequal access to economic, social, and political power, and serves to cause further suffering, oppression, and death among marginalized communities.
Activism against anti-Black violence has been critiqued, discredited, ignored, criminalized, and policed. Calls for an end to anti-Black violence have been met with endorsements of further violence by those with the power to inflict it, illustrating the ways that colonized communities are labeled as dangerous and their voices silenced.
We condemn anti-Black racism, anti-Indigenous racism, and all forms of police violence against marginalized communities, and the leaders who incite, support, rationalize, or tolerate violence, period.
We stand with the Black Lives Matters in colonized, marginalized, and excluded communities everywhere, in demanding significant and meaningful criminal justice reform that addresses a legacy of colonization, racism, and anti-Black violence.
We support calls to reimagine and reconstruct policing, including the prison abolition movement. We call for the police on our campus and on campuses everywhere to condemn all forms of racialized police violence, hold local and national politicians accountable, and elevate the voices of activists and the voices of the most impacted communities.
We pledge to create a community ready to embrace, support, and protect all of its members, and to engage in anti-violence and anti-racist work to promote justice and to protect the most vulnerable.
We are committed to creating a space for dialogue and to support those in our community who are fighting for social justice.
Black Lives Matter.
Black Lives Matter.